standing on the grass at Neyland Stadium, where Tennessee football walked away with a win for the first time in too long, as the last time on this field, Tennessee lost its college football playoff hopes with a loss to Oklahoma. Tennessee returns with a 42-9 win over New Mexico State to cap off homecoming week. Joined alongside Alex Sarkis and special guest Theo Colli. As Sarkis, we'll start with you. Takeaways from this game.
Well, I think the big question that a lot of people had coming into this one was with that third loss, would Tennessee get up for this game? And I think the big thing is the defense did today, and that's something that really we haven't been able to say a whole lot this season. 9 points allowed to the Aggies. You know, it's a lesser opponent, but Tennessee did what they needed to do on the defensive side of the ball. William Wright, a pick six, a really cool moment for that 6-year guy. And that's Tennessee's 6th defensive score of the season. That's the most they've had, I believe, since 1996. So the defense has been scoring. It hasn't necessarily stopped everybody this year, but they've scored the ball, and they did it again today. Ty Redmond with a nice one-handed interception. He's enjoyed a nice freshman season. So overall, you know, one of the better defensive showings we've seen, and that's building off of an Oklahoma game where the Tennessee defense was pretty solid as well. So I think there might be some growth happening in that defensive room, and that's something that you're going to need going into these next 2 SEC games.
Yeah, and you mentioned waking up for this game, and it can often be unmotivating when you look at the schedule. You see a CUSA opponent in the middle of SEC play, down the stretch. You just come off of a loss where it feels like basically your season's over, you don't have anything left to play for, and the players echoed all week, well, no, the opportunity to play is what motivates them. But they came out of this one and didn't really look like they should have. And I guess I'll flip it over to you, Theo. Do you think it's of concern that they came out and looked slow to start this one?
I think, sadly, it's become a theme that we're going to expect in a way. You mentioned the defense, and I think I would have built a bit off of that. What impressed me a bit from them today was their ability to limit the damage, it felt like, because it seemed the Aggies were really prone to pushing the field, at least past our 50-yard line. By the time that they crossed the 50-yard line for Tennessee, the Vols were really good with stopping the 3rd down and 4th down conversions, 8 for 19 for New Mexico State today, and 3rd down conversions, and on 4th down conversions, we were 1 of 5. So the defense was real strong, like you said, but again, it goes back to how they can mesh with each other. They really just haven't been complementing. The offense has not been complementing the defense.
Yeah, and I think that's a valid point to bring up, is complementary football has not been Tennessee's brand of football this season, and the offense is playing well, as it did for the majority of these 7 wins. I guess 6 wins if you take away today, since the offense still didn't really play well. The defense has not been showing up when the offense does. The offense does not show up when the defense does. Well, now you're finished with 10 games. You have 2 left. And once again, playoff hopes really aren't there unless some miraculous, crazy things happen over these final 2 weeks. And even then, the resume is not going to help your case. So at that point, you just have to look forward and build upon what you have on the team right now, and not necessarily look forward to next season, because you still have 2 huge rivalry games left. But that brings me to the point of today. Today's game is where you expect a lot of your young guys to play, to really see what you do have on your roster. And guys didn't see that. The starters played 3 quarters today.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big things that, at least that was some of my keys coming into this one. There was I think it was around 10 minutes left in that 4th quarter. Tennessee had a lengthy lead, certainly enough to probably take your starters out of the game, and guys like Colton Hood and some of your depleted secondary guys were still in there. So, that's something you would have liked to get to that bench a little bit earlier. We did eventually see Jake Merklinger and Jordan McIntyre get their way in there, but it was certainly not the volume that Heupel and the rest of the staff would have probably liked to see, especially with a big Florida game coming up next week. But it's that's kind of been the theme, is Tennessee not getting necessarily all that they've wanted this season. And Joey Aguilar, another guy that I think is in need of a bounce back game now, because his turnovers, they've gotten uglier these past few weeks. And he'll say in his post game that he was frustrated with himself, but he's going to have to clean it up here in these next 2 games if Tennessee wants to come away with a nice number on that record sheet.
Yeah, absolutely. And going into the playing your starters 3 quarters, it haunted Tennessee today. You had Miles Kitselman, he was walking out of the post-game tunnel with the leg brace on and a clear limp. Going to go out on a limb and say he's probably not going to be available next week, because once again, played in the 3rd quarter. In the 3rd quarter, Peyton Lewis knocks his knee out and leaves in a brace. So now, because you, for some reason, decided to play your starters 3 quarters, you could argue that coming off of a bye week, this team has not been strong in previous years, and even earlier this season coming off of a bye week, they looked sloppy in the first game back. So playing 3 quarters might help them knock off some rust a little bit more because they're getting extended run, but you're so far into the season, you don't have really all too terribly much left to play for. You have to see what you've got behind them, and they didn't do that today. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's what makes it a little demoralizing in a way, is that you wanted to hit a point where you're like, all right, the starters did their job. We're good. We can get them out of there. And there was never a point where, even when the score was 28-3, where the fans or Heupel probably felt comfortable with letting his guys out and letting McIntyre and McGee roll. McIntyre only attempted 2 passes, and it's just not something you're going to want to see. You want to see more of him. You want to see more of a guy that you invested so much time into. And I do believe also Peyton Lewis got banged up too, right?
A little bit.
Yeah. So keeping these guys in too long, the leash was just not helping anybody, doing any favors whatsoever. The receiving room has been a bright spot in a way, though. I think if you look at storylines for this season and think of one positive hope for this team moving forward and for this season, there's 3 staple guys on this receiving roster that have really taken a step forward, especially Braylon Staley.
I think one of the interesting thing that Theo touches on there, though, is we saw this Tennessee team go into Kentucky a few weeks ago and have 3 receivers with over 100 yards. Today, Tennessee's highest receiver was 65 yards, and that was Chris Brazzell. So, I mean, the real explosion that we've seen in that receiving room takes a bit of a down hit this week. So I think, that's naturally how football goes. But, maybe the rhythm wasn't quite there. Certainly, I don't think it was there for Aguilar tonight. And distributing the wealth is going to have to be another thing that they have to work on here in these next few weeks.
And you talked about the 65 yards from Brazzell. 45 of that came on one play, so
yeah,
it wasn't as consistent as this receiving room is capable of. And then you look back at the quarterbacking play, and a little bit of rebuttaling you can offer on why Joey's in there a little bit longer, which is for anyone to argue, but he plays into that fourth quarter. They've had a thing for statistical feats. As we mentioned, Kentucky 300-yard receivers. Well, Braylon Staley didn't have 100 quite yet. They throw one more play at him to get over 100. They did the same thing today. Joey Aguilar, 33 consecutive games with 200 passing yards. He wasn't at 200 in that fourth quarter. Well, they throw one more ball to Mike Matthews, get 4 yards. He goes over the 200 mark just barely at 204. They got him that 200. Smash hands with Jake Merklinger there. Jake Merklinger finally comes in with 10 minutes left in the game. So you could argue that maybe that's what they were aiming for. It took a little too long to get to that 200-yard mark. But once again, you can't really bank on that statistical feat there. When Joey Aguilar's, I know college football's crazy. We don't quite know, but there's no reason for Joey Aguilar to have eligibility next season. He should not be back on the roster. You have a quarterback hole. You have 2 quarterbacks on the roster that are young and do not have a lot of snaps under their belt. And you frankly failed them today because you got 1 drive out of Jake Merklinger and you got 2 drives out of George McIntyre, and the second drive was 3 handoffs. So that's, I guess, the note that I personally will leave out on is you kind of failed in getting your young guys experience today. You had a lot of reps for defensive guys, but you needed a little bit more from the quarterbacking room. But with that, Tennessee will now head on the road where they need the best out of Joey Aguilar. The Swamp is up next on the schedule. Florida Gators next Saturday. Still to be determined on a time as games are wrapping up with Ole Miss and Florida still going on at the moment, and that is what I presume is holding them up on whether it's going to be a 3:30 game or a 7 p.m. or a 7:30 game, because we got 3 time slots. But regardless, we'll be there in Gainesville next week.